right, we'll get started. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're stoked that you're here. I'm Claire Donnelly. I'm the project manager for the small business work at the Island Institute. And I'm really excited about this event for a lot of different reasons. One, just because this is a subject matter area that I've been really passionate about for a long time. And then particularly since I started working with small businesses at the Island Institute, with my work, I got to work with a lot of small business owners on sort of island and coastal areas that I realized are having a impact, be it social, be it community, be it environmental, sort of inherently built into what they're doing, but maybe not explicitly talking about it. And so I'm really excited to bring this group of panelists together to kind of cover all aspects of the benefit economy at large. We've got a great spread of folks bringing all different perspectives, which I'm really excited about. My hope is that you'll walk away with like a better understanding of the area at a minimum, hopefully some inspiration, some ideas, and then like maybe even a new language and some tools to start digging into this if you choose to. So this is just sort of an overview if you're not familiar with the Island Institute. We kind of group our work into these three buckets: courageous leaders, collaborative learning, resilient communities. You can learn more on our website, or you can just reach out and ask one of us. We always love to talk about what we do. But before we get started, I'm just going to run through some Zoom logistics. Very exciting. So all attendees are on silent mode, but we have the Q&A box in the chat at the bottom of your screen. So we have a Q&A section at the end, and we really hope that you have questions for our panelists, and just go ahead and enter them in the Q&A box sort of as they come to mind, and then we'll try and get to as many as we can. Those we don't get to, we'll follow up with you all via email afterward. And then there's also the chat function, and definitely use the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from, say hello to each other, let us know if there's a technical issue, but try to enter all your questions into the Q&A. That just makes sure that we don't miss anybody's questions. So this webinar is being recorded, and tomorrow we'll be sending out an email with a link to the recording to it. And then most importantly, in that email will be a link to the Social Shift documentary, which was made by one of our panelists, Joe Huyer. So we're very excited to have Joe with us tonight. He's going to talk through the documentary and give a little intro to the trailer. That concept, the social shift, shifting to the middle, that's really what we wanted to ground the panel in tonight. So we're really excited to have him. We're going to show you the trailer, get you jazzed up. There's Joe. Hey, Joe.
Hey there. How are you, Claire?
Good. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. Muchly appreciated. Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Joe, as Claire mentioned. I work at Common Good Solutions. I think we'll talk a little bit in more depth of what that means. But for right now's sake, we are a social enterprise that's for profit in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I was tasked, I was actually a part of a team of 4 that was tasked to shoot a documentary about what the heck social enterprise is. So it kind of started in 2017, I believe. We were shooting some short promotional videos for other social enterprises in Nova Scotia. And Dave, who's one of the co-founders at Common Good, kind of like came to us one day in a meeting and said like, hey, let's like make a cross-country movie about this. Like, what do you think? And then we're like, okay, sweet. And he basically said, okay, go. And we didn't have any sort of feature-length documentary experience, so we needed to build a team around us that were experts that could help us learn as we go. And some of the stuff is pretty run and gun, they call it in the documentary world. And some of the shots that we're able to get just from being on the journey was pretty awesome. So the other folks that I worked with were Megan and Marie Wright. They don't work at Common Good anymore. They have started their own film company called Mirror Image Media. They're great. They do lots of really awesome content in Nova Scotia. And Kevin, our main camera guy, he actually was contracted from his own company in Toronto, and that's called KC Productions. Why did we do it? We did it because, you know, people in our sort of demographic were starting to talk a little more about social inclusion into business and being a little more conscious of how we go about our day-to-day businesses. And Not many people have the social enterprise language sort of in their back pocket. So what we wanted to do was to create a video or a film that ended up to be that helped learn about how people can do things. There's no sort of rigid structure around social enterprise from our opinion. So there's many different ways you can go about doing it. There's lots of different pieces of impact that you'd like to try and generate. And one of the reasons we did it was to tell that story, and from the angle that's fun, that's energetic, that can help you think about the grand scheme of things, but also some small things you could do in your daily lives. It's used in a few different ways. We did our first premiere filming was in June of 2018, I believe. So that was a great little community event. We brought everyone out and we had a big screen on the street, and a few hundred people came and watched. Since then, we've screened it in Scotland at the Social Enterprise World Forum, and we won an award for Best Editor and Best Documentary in Nova Scotia. And it's also being used as some learning content in events such as these, so you'll be able to see it and use it to your advantage as well. There's a couple of university programs that have it included into the social section of their business programs. So with all that being said, here's a little something to get you excited to watch The Social Shift at home.
In business, we learn about maximizing shareholder wealth, scaling up, and cutting costs.
There's a common misconception about millennials is that they're lazy, that they're disconnected. And folks are like, millennials are disinterested. They're like, no, they're just tired of your bullshit.
When you're done working and you look back on your life, what do you want to be able to tell people?
The pendulum has just swung way out of whack, and it became about money and profits.
The twin stalkers of death on the planet are poverty and climate change.
And government and nonprofit alone cannot address them.
I truly do believe that there are solutions to really big issues.
And as first-time filmmakers, we want to show others that these opportunities do exist. So we set out on a mission across Canada, eager to explore what it means to use business as a force for good.
Don't be afraid of business. Like, capitalism has a very bad name, but it doesn't have to be that way.
We wanted to capture the stories of social entrepreneurs who are making a difference in our country.
The fridge, a lot of love and a little bit of hate.
A, how do we even make this happen? B, how am I even alive to experience this? When bad things happen to you, you have to find the light kind of in it somehow.
You know how to make films, but how are you going to change anything?
Although this isn't the only way to change the world, it's certainly one way. And guess what? It's here to stay.
Awesome. I love that trailer. I'm so excited that y'all are going to get to watch this at home over the weekend or on your own time. It's really good. I'm excited for you all. And then I just wanted to share this graphic before we dive into the panel to kind of give like an overview of this space. The idea of shifting to the middle was one that was brought to us by Common Good Solutions and that we just really latched onto right away. A couple of things that I wanted to call out was one is just that these concepts are new in name only. So if you look back in time, pre-industrial revolution and definitely in Indigenous cultures, it was really baked in to have an impact in your community, to understand that the earth and the water are these finite, very valuable resources. And so we're hoping with the awareness of this space, we're starting to shift back into some of those mindsets. And then just also that no business structure is inherently good or bad. This section in the middle, this shift to the middle, is just what they've identified as this sweet spot, where for-profit companies are starting to have other priorities than just profits. They're thinking about the environment, their community, all of their stakeholders. And then where nonprofits on the other side are thinking about how to build a sustainable business model so they're not reliant on government grants or donations to keep their lights on. And then we've kind of called out a couple. There's some emerging business structures that we've put definitions on here for you. I'm going to put a link to this graphic in the chat so you can refer back to it throughout the panel. But it's kind of like the Wild West in terms of like language right now in this space. And so a lot of these words can be used interchangeably. Those are the ones we've kind of put in the center column, and you'll probably hear some of our panelists use them in different ways. And then the B Corp is a really specific thing as well. So we've kind of defined that. A certification from B Labs is down here at the bottom. I'll put a link. You guys can kind of read it and check back in on it. But if this, resonates with you, and if this is something that you're interested in and want to learn more about, obviously stay on the line, like stay tuned in. That's what we're going to talk about. But also, we have these 5 workshops that we're putting on every Thursday after this. So they're hosted by us, but they're going to be led by Common Good Solutions. You have to register for them separately from the event tonight. So if you haven't registered yet, you can go to islandinstitute.org/events to register for these dates. You can register for one or for all 5. I highly recommend all 5. It's going to be awesome. Okay, that's all that I have to share with you all. So let's bring on Craig Olson. He's the strategic lead for the small business work at the Island Institute, and he's going to moderate the panel.
Great, thanks, Claire. Now, I know everybody's going to have a lot of questions, so please use the Q&A function to send them in. And I'm going to start with the panelists, and I actually am going to call people out and ask directly whom to start with. And so what I'm going to ask, I've got 3 questions to start. First, we want to know who you are. What is your business or the work or your work that's related to this field? And what drew you to this type of work or this type of a business establishment, and what keeps you engaged in it? And I am going to start with Ben Conniff.
Hi, everybody. My name is Ben Conniff. I am a co-founder and now the Chief Innovation Officer of Luke's Lobster. So we are a lobster company. We started out as a tiny little restaurant in New York City that tied back to my partner Luke's father and grandfather and their history in the lobster industry. We started this little restaurant to make authentic Maine lobster rolls using lobster sourced through Luke's family and his direct connections to fishermen. As we grew this restaurant business and opened more and more locations, we realized that it was important to control our sourcing and control our relationships with fishermen. So we started our own seafood production facility in Maine. And at this point, we buy direct from fishermen. We do all of our seafood production in Saco, Maine, and we sell into our own restaurants as well as into grocery stores like Whole Foods in an online market where we ship direct to consumers now, thank you, COVID, all across the US. So really what makes this impact work is that from day one, we've been committed to only serving sustainable seafood and to working directly with our stakeholders in the lobstering community and in coastal communities to make sure that we're returning maximum value to our suppliers. We also put a huge emphasis on treating our team the way that we would want to be treated and the communities around each of our restaurants. So we do have a strong environmental focus on the sustainability of fisheries and now on climate change as well as a social focus on our team, our community, and the broader landscape of social justice. So that led us to becoming a certified B Corp in 2018. That's made us an even better business, and I think we'll get into that a little more later. But yeah, that sums it up.
Great, thanks, Ben. I'm going to jump over to Tara Jenkins. Tara?
Hello. Can you see me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so I, Tara Jenkins, as you said, and I have a consulting practice where I build conscious businesses with CEOs and founders. And as Claire said, there's kind of an alphabet soup of terms that people use when they're talking about this, but conscious business synonymous with really participating in the benefit economy. And sort of that place in the middle where you're really doing business for a higher purpose beyond profit. And at the same time, knowing that you need profit in order to fulfill your purpose. And so I have about 25 years of experience working in corporations of all sizes, from startups to global companies, doing organizational development and human resources. And I've taken that experience to apply that to building conscious businesses.
That's excellent. Thank you, Terry. And I'll just repeat the question too, and I'm going to go over to Ben Waxman next. Name, of course, Ben, but what is your business and the work that you're doing in this field, and what drew you to it, and why are you remaining engaged in it?
Thanks, Greg. It's great to be here with all of you. Name's Ben Waxman. Along with my wife, Whitney Reynolds Waxman, we founded American Roots, which is a 100% American-made, union-made clothing company based in Westbrook, Maine, with about 80 employees currently. My background, I spent 20 years in American politics and within organized labor. I spent a lot of time in the Midwest, and I was based out of Washington, D.C. And I'm a recovering addict. And after I got out of treatment, I realized I didn't want to be in Washington anymore. So I packed my bags and resigned from President's office in Washington and moved back to Maine. I grew up in a textile family. If you had asked me, was I going to go into textiles, hauling wool for my mother, I would have told you absolutely 100% not going to happen. However, like a lot of entrepreneurs, I had a light bulb moment. I was working in a consulting firm when I first moved back and wasn't happy with it. I was making more money than I've ever made in my life, flying around the country, consulting both in energy and labor and a couple other items. And I was wearing a fleece vest that was, the fabrics were made in the United States, and it was being sewn overseas. And so the light bulb exploded in my head, and we decided to start a clothing business based in B2B with a purpose of creating good paying union jobs with wages and benefits, healthcare and retirement, being sustainable, changing the business model. Textile industry is the #2 polluter in the world, behind oil and gas. You buy a sweatshirt from us and we guarantee it for as long as you own it. The zipper breaks, we'll replace the zipper. If we can't, then we'll make you a new one. But there's enough clothes in landfills. And, I really came to the business, and why I wanted to do it was to create jobs in the state I love, but more importantly, to prove that you can make things in America. I had spent almost 20 years in places like Youngstown, Ohio, and Flint, Michigan, and Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, that had been decimated by bad trade deals, and watched whole communities, both in our home state and other states, be decimated due to the wrong side of capitalism. The capitalists, I think we can get it right.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. Joe, we had a little bit of a preview of the film and kind of your background, but what brought you to this type of work, and why are you still engaged in it?
Yeah, so thanks, Craig. I'm relatively new to the professional field. I have a little bit of experience in working in film in the past, but basically got a summer job at Common Good and was able to stick with it. So I basically started, my job was to learn. And I learned for a while and got to a point where my job became going out into the world, which is very hard to do these days. So I spent lots of time at conferences, community gatherings, just accessing and getting really into community. Common Good is a consulting and training firm. We also have a online training platform, which is quite nice because we didn't have to spend much time transitioning. Once COVID hit, we were already a few years boots on the ground by then. Speaking of boots on the ground, we are a consulting firm, but we're quite close to the communities. We spend time there. We really focus our energy on hosting communities to be able to address the challenges and issues that they have on their own. We've worked with some communities that have had consultants come in and drop a 300-page book and say, do this. So we do our best to try not to do that. We try and work with communities to identify the issues, then start brainstorming some ways to address those, and then how we're going to make the money work. We are a for-profit organization, but a social enterprise as defined in Nova Scotia. At least 50% of your surplus revenue must be reinvested back into your mission. So that's one of the things that we do at Common Good Solutions. In addition, we're all paid a living wage, which is about $7 more an hour than minimum wages here. So again, you can see why profit's important, so that we can all be happily in our careers. In addition, we're also a B Corp, and we'll dig into that in a bit. But one of the interesting things we are as well is Bullfrog powered. We don't have very much accessible green energy in Nova Scotia, but Bullfrog Power provides carbon offsets basically. So you get two bills, you get your power bill, and then you send that off to Bullfrog, and they also send you a bit of a bill. But that makes you, you're basically investing into green energies in other parts of the country that don't necessarily have it. I'm not sure if that's the case in Canada. Maybe, Craig, do you know if Bullfrog's in the States too?
Not sure.
Okay.
Honor.
Good. I'm glad. That would have been embarrassing if you all knew what I was talking about already.
I just like the name.
So yeah, like I said, I do the sort of outreach. I'm basically the first point of contact for clients when they come in. Some people are going into our early stage training programs, and other clients that I meet with are already generating revenue sort of in the more capitalist side, the stream of business, and are looking to bring it into the middle a little bit. And we do similar on the other side with nonprofits and community organizations that are trying to balance the books at year end. So there's that, and I get to do one of the things I love doing, and that's making film, being in front of camera, being part of the process. The Social Shift was a wonderful project. We are working on another piece that's of similar nature, and depending on COVID restrictions, we should be done that in the next year or so. So we had to take a break for 3 weeks as lockdown happened over the holidays, but it's starting to loosen up a little bit here for us. So we're going to get back on the road doing some interviews. So that's me and Common Good Solutions.
That's great. Thank you all. And now we have some questions that we have we've thought through, and we're going to present to each of you. But in these subsequent rounds, this sounds like a debate, and it's not. But I am going to ask a question of a specific panelist, and you'll have 3 minutes to respond. Sounds like a debate. We then allotted about a minute for each of the other panelists if they'd like to respond in some way. If you don't, that's fine. We're going to go through the first 4 questions that way. So we'd like to move pretty quickly so we can get to questions that come in through the Q&A. That'll be either for the group or directed to particular panelists. So Tara, you are the first one in the spotlight here. The question I have for you is, being in business in rural Maine is hard enough in its own right. Why should business owners prioritize a triple bottom line? And do you have any examples of businesses in Maine that are really doing this well? You're muted.
Little technical problems. Thank you. Just to clarify, the triple bottom line, going back to what was shared earlier, is really about, often called people, planet, and profits, if you're not familiar with that. And so within the question, so why would you bother? When I'm working with businesses in consideration of this, the first thing we look at is, when you are doing triple bottom line work, that is really looking at stakeholders in a different way, thinking about the purpose of your business, and even balancing that with profit rather than being profit maximizing. Overwhelmingly, what the research shows is that you will actually be a more successful company holistically, including making more profit. So when you think about how we're all taught to think about in business, typically in MBA school, and the way that you're brought up in business is often that you have to keep maximizing profit. And what specific studies, if you even take the Gallup poll as an example, Gallup does a lot of research on employees and engagement in organizations. And you may know that most employees across the United States in particular would report that they're 30% engaged. That's leaving 70% of people's engagement, their capacity, their talents, their skills on the table. And if you are a purpose-driven company, which is a part of the triple bottom line, what it shows is that you get 90% engagement from your employees. So just imagine what that would be like if you have a 30% engaged workforce and you're doing pretty well, and a lot of businesses are, even despite COVID, and then you have a 90% engaged workforce, and the difference of really getting all the talents and capabilities and skills, and people really wanting to contribute to that because they're aligned with the profit, with the purpose of your business, which is driving profit. And so what that really means is, for organizations is, and it's a little bit of a mindset shift, is that you are not making money for the sake of making money. You're making money to fulfill your purpose. And that drives people, that's meaningful. And we all have scenarios where we've worked in places and done jobs that didn't feel meaningful. And we know how hollow that can feel. So what I say is, as a CEO or as a leader of your organization, why wouldn't you want to do more meaningful work for yourself and for your team? And also, why wouldn't you want to make more money? Because you will. And we do have many organizations in Maine. I'm the founder, and this is part of why Claire and I got connected, founder of the Conscious Capitalism chapter in Maine. We have about 100 members. And so every one of those members is a business in Maine practicing conscious business and participating in the bee economy in some way. So we have a very thriving conscious business group in Maine, and specific businesses I could name that are very unusual in the industry. Great Diamond Partners, as an example, is a financial services wealth management company that said from the very beginning of their organization that they wanted to build their business consciously. And then I'm working currently with Bristol Seafood, and they are in the manufacturing industry, which is really, really tough, particularly during COVID, particularly in attracting talent, but they are committed to building business consciously. And every organization is part of, somewhere on the journey. And as Claire said, there's no perfect organization and no perfect business model, but these organizations are saying we want to do it differently. And these leaders are saying, I know that I can do this differently. And I feel the gains each time I'm doing it differently from my own perspective and my own fulfillment and meaningfulness, and how that impacts all of the stakeholders that impact my business or touch my business.
That's great, thank you. Now, any of our other panelists want to weigh in on that one?
I would just, Tara, your comment, making money to fulfill purpose, that's like one of the best things I've heard in a while. So, thank you for saying it. But in all seriousness, I mean, that there's plenty of people that start businesses to just make money, and there's also people that start businesses, like a lot of the people that are probably on this call, because they have a great idea, they believe in what they're doing, or they want to take on a cause. What you just said is what it's really all about. Is that, how much money do you have to make to move your purpose down the line? That's really something that, as entrepreneurs think about what they're going to do next, or even established businesses like the ones on this call, you have to keep that in mind. Is you can make a profit. We have a philosophy at American Roots: profit over greed. We have to make a profit, period. Guess what? You don't have to make 100 times what your worker makes. That's my 2 cents.
Absolutely, that's so well.
Conniff?
Yeah, I'd back up what Tara said about this attitude really ultimately benefiting your business and your financial bottom line beyond your internal team, your other stakeholders. So on the supplier side, for us, that's fishermen. The fact that they know that we are devoted to more than just lining the pockets of ourselves and the shareholders of the company means that we have really stable, positive, productive relationships with them. everything is transparent, everything is out on the table, and we're able to really benefit from knowing exactly what to expect from our suppliers because they know what to expect from us. On the other side, on the buyer front, Whole Foods is one of our best customers, and they are serving what they see as what their consumers are demanding. And the reason that they latched onto us as their lobster provider was our B Corp status and our commitment to doing environmental and social good. And that ultimately led to us becoming their supplier of the year in 2018. And to think that that doesn't translate into a positive financial outcome, as well as all the other positive outcomes that go along with it, it's been pretty clear to us how taking this tack has really benefited every side of the business and not cost us.
Joe, anything?
I would very much like to concur about the capacity for people working in these organizations. I see lots of clients coming through the door that are engineers, are lawyers, are accountants, are bankers, and they're spent. They are tired of making money for the faceless shareholder, and in this sort of perpetual capitalism that has evolved into what we are living in today, and they're looking for something they can sink their souls into. And being able to still work hard and in your field or craft, in addition to contributing socially, culturally, or environmentally, is what a lot of people in my demographic are really looking for. And it's a leap of faith for sure, but as more people do it, it becomes a lot more sort of socially acceptable, to muddy the waters around the term social some more. But yeah, I think people are starting to realize that their 37.5 or 50 hours a week can be spent making the world a better place instead of making money war bucks, an extra penny or two in his pocket. So
great, thank you. I mean, one question, we had two great phrases: making money to fulfill purpose and sinking your soul into it. I had to write both of those down, so we might have to have workshops with those titles down the road. My next question I'm going to throw to you, Ben Waxman. Some people really think you need to wait to be profitable before thinking about prioritizing a triple bottom line. Others say you build the foundation of your business on it. When do you feel is the right time to do something like that? And when did you realize with American Roots that you are operating a mission-driven business?
I think it's garbage. You can't do that. I'll be honest. I don't mince words. The bottom line is this: if you truly believe in something and you have an idea and you have a set of values, that idea should not affect your values, and your values cannot affect that idea, period. Simple as that. American Roots from day one, whether we knew it or we didn't know it, was a triple bottom line company. Because to be honest, I had never heard the term until probably year 3 what that meant, let alone what a P&L was when we first started the company. But when you start a company, and I don't want to speak for anybody else, you have an idea and you think your idea is the greatest idea in the world. You have no idea if it can make money. When you start that company, you still have a set of values, and it's your job as you grow your company and your idea to stick to your values. And you can't waver from that foundation, because the second you waver from that foundation is the second that you actually lose your idea. And that I truly believe. And you have to have a willingness to grow and change. You have to have a willingness to make tough decisions, but they don't have to sacrifice your values. And I'll give you an example. In our second year of operations, we had a massive fabric recall. It was the dead of winter. At the time, we had 14 employees. It was not the employees' fault that the fabric was bad. We could either lay them off or we could pay them until we resolved the issue. we laid them off, there's a chance we would never get them back. We train our workers. If we paid them, we were going to lose a lot of money. We paid them. And with that, those same workers, 80% of them are still at our factory. That was 3.5 years ago. You have to create loyalty. It's got to be a give and take. If the company makes money, workers make money. It's not rocket science. CEOs or CFOs or COOs, yes, they make a higher wage. Yes, owners make a higher wage. Yes, investors get their return. There's nothing wrong with that, but there has to be a balance, and you cannot waver from your core set of values on any idea you have, because the second you waver from that, you have cracks. And I've watched that in other companies, in my industry, where people get ahead of themselves and they pay the consequence because their employees aren't as productive. Our company was founded with the simple premise that we want to be the company that proves you can do it right in the United States. You can make things in America, that it's a choice, it's an economic choice by people that are on this call, that aren't even in my industry, that said, we're not going to do that anymore, we're going to ship it overseas because of shareholders, to Joe's point. That has to stop. The only way that stops is by people who have ideas, stick to their values and what they believe in as humans.
Excellent. Excellent. Ben, Tara, Joe?
I completely agree with that. And I think when this question comes up to me, like something that Ben said about getting out ahead of yourself, I think is really important, because I do think that profit is a critical ingredient of sustainability. And that's not to say that you can't make a decision like the one Ben described that's going to lose you a lot of money. But we're a big proponent of living within our means, because if you create a foundation that's all about doing good and you lose a ton of money and you go raise more money and you lose it all, and then you go raise more money and lose it all, ultimately, you're going to be beholden to a lot of people who are not folks that share your values, and you're creating a bubble that's going to burst, and every one of the stakeholders that's come to rely on you is going to fail because you created this bubble without profit. So it is important to establish that baseline of profit so that all of the good work that you're doing is sustainable over time. But I completely agree with Ben that you start out with those core values, and those are the things that you will never move off of, no matter what. And that will help guide you as you try to live within the bounds of not losing your shirt.
You know, Craig, can I just add to what Ben said?
Absolutely.
You know, we pivoted, you know, when COVID hit. We went from making clothes to making PPE. We went from 28 employees to 127 in a 3.5 month period. We right-sized the company this past fall. That was the hardest decision my wife and I had ever made, to look people in the eye in the middle of a pandemic and say, we've got to lay off 38 people. But we also have 80 people times 5 plus their families that we have to rely on, that they're relying on us to move the company forward. That's when you have to be a business owner. You have to be willing to make tough decisions that are in the best interest, to Ben's point, for profitability. Because if you're not profitable, your shareholders aren't going to continue to invest, and eventually that bubble is going to burst.
That's a great point. Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to highlight something that Ben said around the reciprocality of relationships, that it's a reciprocal relationship between employees and the employer and all of your other stakeholders. If you're really thinking in this paradigm that we're talking about, you're thinking about how does everyone add value to one another? And if you start the business with that approach, with that philosophy, To the question around like, when do you start this? What I find, particularly in my work in organizations over a number of years, and particularly in consulting, is the organizations that will call me, sometimes they're calling when they have major pain. There is a pain happening in the business that's pretty acute. And almost always the root cause of that pain is that they have not established values, not established what the higher purpose or the worthy cause that they're solving with their business are, or they have strayed from those foundational elements in some way where they have lost their way, and they have an attraction issue for employees or a retention issue with employees, because employees see what's really going on in an organization like no one else does. So you can put all the marketing spiel you want on the website and make all these pretty pictures and all those things, and then what employees experience, you'll end up seeing the evidence of that in the way that they join the organization and leave the organization. And so I see the pain that is caused by not doing it at the beginning, to Ben's point.
One of the things that we do is we assist with entrepreneurs on all levels of that spectrum, very beginning startup to well-established organizations. So to the question of when, the sooner the better. Now works. You don't. If you had a goal of saying, okay, I want to be, have 150 grand in the bank before I start contributing, and you're 2 years down the road in your project and you're not anywhere close, then there might be an opportunity to pivot and instead of thinking at it from a sort of perspective of now I have money, I can distribute money, maybe working in how your day-to-day operations can contribute to the issues that you're trying to address. Common Good Solutions started from the beginning with this intention. I've dealt with some nonprofit folks who are just, their business, their nonprofit idea is so wonderful and so great and can generate so much impact, but they basically just wind up being grant writers, sort of to Ben's point, of getting money, spending it, getting money, spending it. So it's important that, if you're thinking about generating impact, to think about where that money is going to come from. And if you want to spend that time of your capacity on developing solutions to those challenges, then to not spend as much time writing grants is beneficial as a whole, similar to Tara's point about spending time on these things.
Points all around. I just want to remind the participants, to get your questions, right questions in the Q&A. So we'll have those at the end. I'm going to come back to Joe with this next question. Joe, what unexpected thing did you learn? And when you were making this documentary, was there a business or person that really inspired you while you were making it that really sticks with you today?
Yeah, so there's a few levels and layers to that, and I'll start with the one that hit me the hardest. And it wasn't actually a specific organization or a specific model. It was the fact that so many people from across the country who aren't connected to each other are achieving like borderline miraculous results from addressing challenges and issues and some of the hard things that there are in the world by doing business. And there's no right or wrong way to doing that. It was really stark to me that some people could have such dramatically different models, but be equally generating dramatic impact. So that was something that really will stick with me forever. It's my faith in humanity, really, that there are people that are doing it and doing it on their own accord. And, as was said earlier, it is kind of the Wild West, but every business that does something cool is a step towards really making it a big thing around the world. So I would say all of them are for sure inspiring. The main things we kind of look at in Common Good Solutions are social issues, cultural issues, and environmental issues. And then a bit of that we sort of talk about to a degree is policy as well. So I'll give you one example of each of those and how they sort of carry things out. On the social side, there's a wicked company in Vancouver called Embers Staffing Solutions. And basically what they do is they are the office point of address for people experiencing homelessness of varying levels. And it's a construction company. So they are outsourced to hire laborers and tradespeople. And what they do is they give people a boot and PPE allowance so that they can actually get on a job site. They run lots of safety programs, again, so they can get on the job site, so they can actually acquire those jobs. They give a mailbox if they need it so that the checks can be sent to them, so that their T4s can be sent, which are like the same as 401ks, I think, in the States, tax paper. And one of the things in Canada, when people hear the term social enterprise, I think it's small time business that doesn't do much in terms of business annually. Embers does in the multi-millions of close to $10 million a year in business, and provide hot lunches and are really giving opportunities for people to get back into the workforce, having fallen out of it for whatever reason. They're not judgmental, they're compassionate, and they've built a business around traditional industry that supports persons with significant life challenges. So that's a really interesting one. On the cultural side in Winnipeg, there was a school called, what are they called? I've got notes, watch my eyes. Children of the Earth High School. It's a school that's sort of in one of the areas of the city that's a little rougher around the edges, people would describe it. It also has a dense population of racialized persons. Whether that's a coincidence or not, we'll leave it up to you. But this school has an after-school program that is an arts program, and they make their own money so that they can buy art supplies for young generally Indigenous students after school. They also have sandwiches and snacks, and they can stay for almost as late as they like. They can create in any way. They can create by writing, by painting, by drawing, by any number of things. And though they have an art show every year and sell prints, and it's really great. And that money that gets sold, half of that money goes back to the artist, and the other half goes back into the program so that they can keep feeding students and giving them a safe space. A lot of students don't feel very safe in their home dwellings. So my thoughts are out to them in these challenging times where we are restricted to our households. But yeah, I think what the work they're doing, it's an after school program. So Embers, this multi-million-dollar thing, is for sure part of the business that we do. But then there's also people like the folks at Children of the Earth School. Environmentally, and this one also has a bit of a social aspect as well. And I love it when businesses blend like this. They're called Good Foot Delivery, and they're in Toronto, and they train and have clientele that are, I have to look at my notes because it's a term I hadn't heard in a while, of the neurodiverse population. So persons with varying degrees of neuro challenges that may be different from what you'd consider in dominant culture. And they're a courier company, and they basically have trained over 60 people to pick up mail and use public transit and bring it to the other spot. So it's reducing in the environmental footprint of the courier companies, but also providing some social support for people who are generally forgotten about in the workforce. And lastly, on the policy side, which is something that is interesting and not directly related to social enterprise, but there's a woman from Vancouver. Her name is Andrea Reimer. She was a city councillor in Vancouver. And if you care to, you can sort of dig into her background. She's pretty open about how her life had evolved. But she'd gone through some really, really challenging things, including homelessness and addiction and other types of abuse, and has evolved into working in policy. And she was the one who brought forth the table for Vancouver to be one of the greenest cities in the world. And when she came in, they weren't even on the top 50 list. And by the time she left office, they were number 4 greenest city in the world. So just the mindset, and regardless of where you come from, there's opportunity to create impact on a scale that's really unimaginable. So there's no specific person that does this other than, I would say, passionate. So all those are really awesome, and I love thinking about them, and especially during trying times such as late, to know that there are other people in the world trying to do good things.
Thanks, Joe. Just a quick lightning round between the other 3. I mean, is there a business, if you think of a business that inspired you or you find inspirational, do you have one you can throw out?
I gotta give it to Ben and Jerry's. I just like to be an ice cream company. I mean, they make ice cream, and yet the amount that they've done in so many capacities over the years. I met those guys at the Common Ground Fair in Maine when they were creating those stamped dollar bills saying "not for bribing politicians." Like, the way they got involved in that campaign was so cool. And now they just absolutely unvarnished commentary they're making on racial justice is so wonderful. And going back to stats I saw recently, when we're talking about really millennials valuing purpose in business, and I think it's something like 70% of millennials use that when they make their purchasing decisions. For boomers, it's like 5%. You have this story of the hippies who just forgot about their values as they got older, and here you have Ben and Jerry who are just going deeper and deeper and deeper over time. I find them so inspirational.
I agree with Ben on that. I would add Patagonia to the list. I get a lot of inspiration from Patagonia for sure. They're like the poster company for conscious business, and we have been doing this for a really, really long time and refined it. I absolutely get inspiration from Luke's Lobster and American Roots. So I should shout out to you guys. And also Embers Staffing Solutions that you mentioned, Joe. I had the privilege of watching Joe's awesome documentary, so definitely watch it after when you get the link. But we have a similar model here in Maine called Mainworks that does similar work to what Joe described as Ember Staffing Solutions. So I just wanted to call that out too, because we have something really close to home.
I'm embarrassed. When I started the business, I started listening to how I built this on NPR, like a psychopath driving around America in my Ford Explorer with a muffler being held up by a coat hanger late at night, getting home to a newborn baby for the first 2 years. And so I would listen late at night to how I built this. And so Ben and Jerry's is like became the poster child. And then like overcoming things, it became Stonyfield Farms and Patagonia, their founder, his whole philosophy, our entire view on clothing is based on Patagonia's vision that if you make it well, it should last. And if it breaks, fix it, don't replace it. Make things that last so we don't ruin the world. And then the third person, it's actually an individual / company, was Aaron Fernstein, who was the founder of Polar Tech, which was formerly Malden Mills. And they called them the Mensch of Malden, based on the fact that when the mill burned down, it was a massive fire in the 90s. He paid every single worker and ended up losing ultimately the company to, unfortunately, a private equity firm that sold it multiple times. But he paid those workers, and that was our gut check moment as a company, Whitney and I, when we lost a much smaller scale fabric paying our workers. It wasn't their fault, just like it wasn't their fault that the mill burned down. Those are my driving forces, and my mom's.
That's great, because it's so nice to hear that inspiration part, because I think sometimes we get blinders on and people begin to not look at those folks that came before us. And the one factoid that I always like is Yvon Chouinard actually grew up, or spent his first, 3 to 6, maybe till he was 6 or 7 years old in Maine, French Canadian, working in the mills. Parents were mill workers. So it's an interesting how things circle around. The last kind of formal question I'm going to ask of Ben Conniff, Ben C. And that question is, how do you answer people who say B Corps are just a marketing ploy for millennials versus actual operational changes?
It's a funny question, because it's actually like the polar opposite of the truth, because there are so many buzzwords out there that that are completely unregulated, unverified, and you are able to slap on your business with no verification whatsoever. B Corp certification means that you actually spent an egregious amount of time going through an assessment bit by bit, measuring every single impact that your business had, and then had to produce the paperwork to prove every one of those claims that you made, so that you can be verified, scored, and officially stamped a certified B Corp. So the reason, first off, that we did it was so that when all of our kind of competitors in the food industry were throwing around the same words that we were, sustainable, traceable, we knew the one thing they wouldn't be able to do was become a certified B Corp. So that's what we did. We went out and we went through the process to prove it. It absolutely does not mean that if you're not a certified B Corp, you're not a good for the world company. In the same way that you don't have to be an MSC certified fishery to be a sustainable fishery. You don't need to be certified organic to be a sustainable farm. There are reasons that people don't become certified B corporations. However, you really cannot become a certified B corporation without absolutely producing the evidence that you're doing good for the world. And that is really why it is so much more than a marketing ploy. Honestly, I would also say when we certified in 2018, they did a study, and the general consumer awareness of the B Corp certification was less than 0.5% in the US. So if we were going through that all for the marketing, it was not exactly a great investment. Now, just 3 years later, awareness has grown massively, and I think it's really on the way up, and it's going to become a great tool for marketing. But it's so much more than that. And when you see a company that's willing to step up to the plate and do it, it signifies a company that really has their house in order and has permanent written policies geared towards achieving their values, and is actually tracking and measuring what they do to make sure that the consequences that they intend are the consequences that they actually get.
Tara, I know that you work with a lot of companies that look at that B Corp route. Do companies find it daunting?
Yes, and they should. I think to Ben's comment about it being egregious or incredibly rigorous, like it's a serious investment, and you pay to participate as the company, and then you have to put internal resources in place to do that over a long period of time. And what I have companies often asking, because there isn't the allure of the increasing understanding in the public, particularly with millennials, of what a certified B Corp is, of like, maybe I should like join that group. And so what I'm talking about with any business leaders they're asking that is, if the first reason you're asking me that is for a marketing reason, you won't make it through the certification process because it requires a sort of a feeling in your heart that you want to continuously improve your business, and a drive and a motivation that goes far deeper than marketing. So you won't sustain the process. And then once you've done it, you're doing it every 3 years to recertify because you've made that initial investment. So this is a very long-term investment for the organization. And those like Luke's Lobster that engage in it are doing it because they want to continuously improve, and they want an objective body looking at that and holding them accountable. And that is very effective for a lot of organizations. As Ben said, you don't have to be a certified B Corp in order to be practicing the principles that we're talking about here, but there's no way you'll get certified if you aren't. So it is a way for individuals who are seeking to vote with their dollars or vote with their time as an employee, to say, like, my precious lifetime is going to be spent at a company that really means what they say around this type of work and around this consciousness and around building business in a different way. It's a really easy way to distinguish the companies that you want to be associated with.
And I think in it, like, to add to that, Tara, we just went through our second recertification. So we still have the stamp of approval, but you're right, it is a pretty significant amount of work that needs to be done. But for Common Good Solutions, one of the important pieces for us is to be able to gain people's trust. We work in business. We charge a rate that's affordable, and we say all these things about changing the world and doing it with profit, and they're like, okay, come on, like, this has got to be too good to be true. So one of the things we do as sort of insurance in gaining people's trust is to say, this is the rigorous process that we go through. There's a third party that's, checks and balancing our day-to-day operations. And, I think one of the things to be B Corp certified is every time you get reassessed, you have to be better than what you were last time. So sticking with status quo is not even good enough for B Corps. So it's a great way to be able to show people that, like, hey, we mean it. We're not just polish and poop here. So, and it's a good way for us to rejig our direction, because when it did come time, we were able to sort of poo-poo at ourselves a little bit for not achieving some goals, but ultimately tapping ourselves on the back for some of the other things that we just inherently do that are highly valued, and we were able to celebrate those things as well, and also be able to learn about the things that we can do better at.
That's excellent. Thanks, Joe. We actually have some questions coming in through the Q&A, and I want to move on to those now. I'm going to remind the participants, if you've had a question you'd like to direct to a particular panelist, please put their name in there. And please remember, we have two Bens. So it can be Ben C or Ben W. The first question that came in, this is interesting. This is both for both of the Bens. For Luke's and American Roots, how do you focus on competition? And do you have competitors that are traditional and shareholder driven that sets up kind of a good guy versus bad guy story?
And you want to go?
Sure. So we do have competitors. We definitely have competitors that are traditional, and we have competitors that are values driven. I don't know if we have any competitors that are values driven and B Corps, but we definitely have competitors that claim to be values driven, and we have some that back it up. So I think, like any industry, there's a gamut. We don't focus on competitors other than, I think, in the example that I mentioned, where we saw that there were competitors that were making claims and not backing that up. And that was one of the reasons we became a B Corp. But our approach to competitors is to be better, and then to talk about the good things about us and our suppliers and our team and our stakeholders and the overall 360-degree impact of our business. But we always focus on the positive attributes of what we do. And by we, I mean the family of stakeholders that is all responsible for creating our product. And we never focus on anyone else that's a competitor of ours, unless we're partnering with them. And that happens very frequently too, that we partner with competitors who we like and trust and respect. And, we co-brand dishes, and we do all sorts of things like that with great brands, but we're not out there vocally competing with anybody. We're focusing on doing the best that we can do and communicating what's good about us.
Similar to what Ben said, 95% of our business currently is B2B, and the B2B meaning we make a product, and then another institution, company, what have you, union would put their logo on it for branded apparel. And it's a $22 billion industry alone in the United States. We are, if you look at that giant mountain, we are actually this very small hill over on the side, because we're actually, in fact, the only company that guarantees that every single product is American sourced material and that it's made by a unionized workforce. So in that sense, I don't think about competition. Now, I would be naive to say we don't have competitors. We have hundreds, thousands of competitors. And so our job is to put our story and our product on the same playing field when someone goes to buy from us. Because you have to make a conscientious decision. Everybody has budgets. One, they're going to buy a high quality product, and two, they're buying a story. And we have a saying around here, it's got to feel right. And it's got to feel right in every aspect. That whether you're Wex in Portland, who is a client of ours, or Sappi International, who's a client of ours, or IBW, or the steelworkers, or the painters, or unions in specific, or Narragansett Beer Company, they buy from us because they want the product, but they also want the story. And so, like Ben said, I don't think there's good versus bad. My dream is that there are 100 American roots in 10, 20, 30 years, because we're disrupting an industry that is riddled with unfortunate labor practices, bad trade policy, and bad environmental policy.
That's great. I'll put in my plug for branded wear right there. Got in my pocket. I have a follow-up for you, Ben. Actually, this one just came in. Can you? And this is interesting, and and it's a serious question. Can you talk more about your training program with your mom and how that started?
Yeah, I mean, my wife Whitney and I had this originally. My mother, when I was frustrated with making a lot of money and not being happy, and wanted to start a business, she said, well, why don't we start a blanket business together? And I love my mom, but it didn't excite me. What excited me, and if she's listening, I don't know if she is, but was the idea of creating jobs, and that was the root of it, and making something that was American. My mother is, for all intents and purposes, the godmother of this company in many ways, because I watched my mom and my father, Dan, build a company that made American-made clothing when I was a child, who bought wool from the Cascade Woolen Mill in Oakland to the Oxford Woolen Mill in Oxford. And my brothers and I were responsible for picking up those fabrics. And we watched those mills closed. And there's nothing worse than walking into a mill and you're picking up fabric at a factory that doesn't operate. And so when we had the idea, the initial thought in my head was, well, this is Maine. Everybody knows how to sew. It's an old textile state. Well, the problem is that all these places closed 20 and 30 years ago. So nobody's left. So my mom said, you got to start a training program. And so my mom and my wife, Whitney, developed a training program that in conjunction with Coastal Enterprise, CEI, I give a big shout out to them, as well as Goodwill Industries, where we had to train a workforce from day one. And we trained 6 people. And the first woman who walked through our door was a woman named Anam Jabir. I thought we were going to have native-born Mainers walking through the door. And the people that walked through our door were from Iraq and the Congo and Angola and other places. And Anam walked in and said, I'm Anam Jabir. I have a master's in agricultural engineering, and I want to learn how to sew. And we trained her and 5 other people and graduated them in October and launched the company in 2015. Anam is now the head of the union, and she's the head of Factory 2. We have 2 factories in the same facility. We break it up because of COVID. And she's bought her first home. She's a proud US citizen. And so that's really how that all began. And my mom stepped back and continued that training program for other great companies like Flowfold, Seabags, Hyperlight, some other companies where there was a real need. And I would just put a plug in that if we're going to make things in America and we're going to contribute to an infrastructure, we have to invest in training. We have to invest in training. We cannot talk about it. Workforce development is a fun word that is used, but it is only a word. It has to be invested in. It costs $34,000 on our sheet to get somebody to a level of training where it's profitable for the company. That's a lot of money when you're talking about 85 people. So the more that we can invest in that, my mother's school, Common Threads of Maine, continues to operate as a 501c3 and do great work.
That's fabulous. Now, does any of that play into, I mean, do you talk about that in your marketing?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, you know, we when we started in 900 square feet, and after we graduated our first group, they sewed from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, our first orders. Our first order was the University of Pennsylvania, and our second was the Painters Union. But as orders came in, we had to start a second training. And so my wife and I would go from, with my mom helping us, from 6 o'clock in the morning until 10 o'clock at night, because the second training would be in the evenings. And so that really became engraved in our story of, if you want to do something, you got to bootstrap it. You got to do the work. You have to do the work. You have to understand it. I can't sew anything, but I know how machines operate. I know when a machine's operating properly because I was there at the ground level. Just like I'm sure in Luke's Lobster, you guys all understand the inner workings of what your supply chain goes through. And so that's a big part of our marketing. We've actually, for the first time as a company, made the decision to invest in marketing. In 5 years, we've invested less than 1% of our total profit and revenue into marketing. So we're viewing it as a sky's the limit, because we brought on a new marketing team and we're excited about it. So
that's great. That's great. And this actually, and whomever wants to answer can raise their hand and we can go around. This other question just came in. Can any of the panelists speak to how they think, if you know, how an ESOP, which is an employee stock ownership plan, fits into this concept of B Corps or just, you know, social enterprises that are attuned to their communities, or the person asks, or know what demographic it might speak to. I think it came up like in the organic food industry as well as B Corps, but how do ESOPs figure in, or how can they figure in?
Well, I could start, and then certainly my fellow panelists jump in. So when you're going through B Corp certification, one of the areas of assessment is if you have an employee-owned organization in some way. So some kind of structure related to that. We have one that comes immediately to my revision. Energy is an ESOP and also a certified B Corp in Maine. And so the way that you run an ESOP is, of course, different in that the ownership model is dispersed amongst the employees, but there typically is a leadership structure, and that leadership structure is responsible for making sure that the organization continues to get certified. So certainly from the B Corp certification perspective, if you are familiar with it, you get points for having done different things within your organization. And certainly having an employee-owned organization gives you more points often relative to some of the other things you could be doing. So it often is something that an organization is considering, but obvious if they're going through B Corp certification, but it's a big decision and usually something that is strategic and longer term oriented to become an ESOP.
Yeah, and just on the ESOP thing, I look behind my desk, I have this book that my attorney has given us, 2 attorneys, that I'm reading through because we have a goal in 2022 of profit sharing with our employees, which everyone is really excited about. It's common sense. If a worker is invested and they know they have a long-term investment, you're going to have a better company. So from the beginning, we've always been moving towards some type of an Esop profit sharing structure that will begin to take shape in 2022. So we're really excited about it. I'm learning a lot. I should have gone to law school.
Ben?
Yeah, I mean, so we have sort of a blend of, we have a profits interest program where some of the more senior members of the team have earned ownership in the business. And then we also, in years other than COVID years, we have not a formalized, but basically a profit sharing bonus plan at the end of each year. So I'm in awe of folks that have able to achieve the full ESOP status. I think our red tape in the US doesn't make any of these things like the least bit easy. Even just bonusing teammates at the end of the year becomes incredibly difficult because you have to go back and recalculate every dollar of overtime that they made for the entire year. If you give them a bonus at the end of the year, it's wild how difficult tax law and things like that can make all of this. But we do our best, and when folks can get to that level, it's truly impressive.
On the bonus thing, we have 11 languages spoken at the company, 13 countries represented, and I'll never forget the reaction when we announced the bonus. They thought it was X, but then the tax thing came in, and it was a really crappy conversation to have. So we've worked to do a lot of financial education around it, but to Ben's point, there is way too much.
Joe?
Yeah, at Common Goods, it's not necessarily employee sharing, but because of the definition that we go by under social enterprise, we're inherently sort of redistributing the profit. Building those structures has been a challenge. Getting Bullfrog Power, getting B Corp certified, having HR after our team grew from 6 to 26. Those have all been some pretty large challenges we've had to overcome, and we're quite new. So there's been some talk about it around our shop. It is a weird conversation that happens, I think, because as much as people that I work with are interested and engaged and wish to sort of participate in that as partial owners, they're also feeling as though that their work would go kind of against working directly for a cause or contributing. So there's some folks in our shop that wouldn't necessarily feel super comfortable in that stage. So there's been some conversation, but for us, it's still quite a ways out. But I think it's highly admirable that you're all looking into those things. So and that's a cool model that I don't think it's used a lot in Canada. I think it's hasn't really caught on, I suppose.
We've got 2 final questions that have come in on the Q&A, and we've got about 10 minutes left, so we will make this somewhat quick. The first question is, and this is really interesting, is there an organization that's too small to consider a triple bottom line? Barbershop?
No. I was told we couldn't provide healthcare to our first 8 employees, and said nonsense. So I think it's a choice. Either do it or you don't.
Well, and you look at, because we talked about certified B Corps quite a bit on here, there is no restriction on the size of the company to be a certified B Corp either, just as a note. So, and that's, if we were to look at the most rigorous process, that would be one that we've talked about a lot. And then the rest of what we're talking about is often philosophy and internal practices within organizations, which I would argue you could practice on yourself if you're a sole proprietor. And then as you're adding in more people, you should just be continuing to spread the values and the purpose of the organization amongst those. So absolutely not. Start from the
That's
if
great.
you
And
have one person, you have no one to convince about your decision to do good things for other
That's
people.
right. That's right.
In the world. So it's the easiest way to be a triple bottom line business.
Very easy to convince.
I will say that you do you have to balance your passion and your values versus finances. You know, you can't make stupid decisions early on that cost you your actual company. You have to be smart about that, but you know, it doesn't mean you can't start from the beginning.
And you don't have to do everything to do something. I think that's a huge mistake that people make. They don't try to do, you know, part of the good that they could ultimately do because they're uncomfortable. They're going to get called out on what they're not doing. You can't be perfect all at once. And if you wait until you're perfect, you'll never do anything good for anybody. So you got to identify what you can do that is good, and you got to start doing it. And then you can work your way towards your future goals.
That's a good point. And you know, Claire and I see in a lot of the businesses that we work with, the ones that come to mind often are stores in island communities where they're creating, you know, they're providing an essential service. They're not, you know, making tons of money, but they understand the need in the community to have that service in the community, and they keep plugging along. The final question is,
do you mind if I just chime in?
Oh, I'm sorry, Joe. Sorry, go ahead.
There's one quote from Margaret Mead that it's up in the Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg. It's in the documentary. You might be able to catch it fly across the screen. And I love to bring it up every time something like this comes about. I like to share it with folks. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now for the final question, what are some steps a business might take to incorporate a triple bottom line if they're interested in making the shift without becoming certified or anything like that? What any quick tips?
Have a conversation with your team. Number one, don't get some great idea and just run down that road without bringing in all your internal stakeholders and getting them aligned towards why you want to make that shift and what it's going to do for the business, both positive and negative. The last thing you want to do is try to make a change in your organization unilaterally towards something like this, because the worst thing is you do that and you fail, and then you really derail future desire to do that, because you know the folks around you and your team are going to be totally disillusioned by that initial failure.
Tara?
Yeah, I'd say one key step is to ask yourself a question around your business and bring your team around you to ask the question of what worthy problem are you trying to solve in the world? So that's really the key question around your higher purpose of your organization. And then who are the stakeholders, because we've used that term. So who are all the people that we touch, all the entities that we touch in the fulfillment of that purpose, and how are we building relationships continuously with them to understand what value means to them? So I think there's a lot of questions that you can sit and, you know, with some discipline, sit and think through as an organization. What are our values, as Ben articulately described it earlier? What are the values that we make decisions by? And those key questions around what is our purpose, what relationships do we need to cultivate, and what are our values, provide clarity in decision making so that you can zoom. You can just it's easy. Like the hardest thing to do for many businesses is to make decisions. And the reason is because they don't have those fundamental pillars in place of what are we here in business to do? What's the worthy problem we're solving? Who are the stakeholders and people that we care about building relationships that we want to add value to? And what are our values as an organization that guides our decision making?
Joe?
I'd say with you kind of have to look at yourself and say, like, do I have the resources to do it? As we've all said about the B Corp thing, it's a lot of work. And if you're already working at burnout capacity rates, doing all the good work, trying to change the world, and have to get in the way of yourself to actually complete the process, then I would say, maybe it's not the right time to think about becoming a B Corp. If you've got a little bit of extra flexibility and time and some resources to commit to it, then I would say it's valuable, but not to use that as sort of the keystone that is social purpose businesses, but using it as a tool in various ways to, make yourself better, to market to an extent, and to, check and balance yourself as you go along. But if you don't have the time and resources, and if it's going to fold your business because you want this to happen, then, maybe wait till another time.
Everything everybody just said. But I think that, the one thing you have to have is you have to have it in your gut. And you have to be willing to sacrifice everything. The vacation, weekends, because as owners, you have to do more if you're going to do this. Your employees work 40 hours a week. You work 60. You may work 70. You may work 80. You may work 90. And you have to be in that mental mindset on everything Ben and Tara and Joe just said to do that. If you're not willing to walk through the fire, as they say, without knowing when it's going to end, you're not going to get through it. And you have to really be in a place mentally and spiritually and physically that you're willing to put yourself through that. And I'll leave it on this note. When my son was born, I had $147 in my personal checking account, and I had $3,000 in the business account, and I needed $10,000 more to make payroll. That was a gut check moment that you have to keep going. And you have to have all the things that Ben and Tara and Joe are saying, but you also it has to be in you that you're going to do this, and you're not going to lose sight of the ultimate goal, which is to be a good citizen in the world as a business owner.
Absolutely. I think we're going to get a few t-shirts out of these comments today. I can't thank you all enough. This was a fabulous session. And I want to thank all the participants who joined us and for all the great questions that came through. And I also am inviting everyone on the call or on this meeting tonight to really, check out the Business for Purpose and Profit website. We've got, here we have our graphic. You can sign up for that. We start next week. If you thought tonight was exciting, wait until you dig into the webinar. And we're going to send out a link to this presentation as well as a link to view the full documentary Social Shift and information on the webinar coming up. Again, I want to thank you for your time, to the participants and the panelists. Now get out there and do some good work. And I thank you very much and good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
All the best.